In 1956, Grace Kelly's family paid $1 million, and Grace herself paid another million from her own Hollywood earnings, to a prince whose kingdom was broke. The Channel 5 documentary Grace Kelly: The Missing Millions investigated those figures and confirmed the total. $2 million in 1956 currency, $22 million adjusted for today. Every reverential documentary about Grace Kelly glosses past this part. Beautiful tributes exist, validated by scholars who've spent decades studying her life. That reverential ground is fully claimed. What remains unclaimed is the financial ledger and the psychological wound underneath. The documented reality that Grace Kelly's family purchased a fairy tale, and she spent every remaining year of her life paying interest in loneliness, lost identity, and a personal fortune that evaporated so completely that investigators could trace only $10,000 to her name when she died. To understand how one of Hollywood's highest-paid actresses ended up with almost nothing, you have to start in the house she grew up in, the emotional architecture inside it. John Brendan Kelly Sr., Jack to everyone who knew him, built Kelly for Brickwork into one of the most successful construction companies on the East Coast. His fortune made the Kellys one of Philadelphia's wealthiest Irish Catholic families. Wealthy, though, was never enough for Jack. Rich, athletic, photogenic, and Irish Catholic. In mid-century Philadelphia, that combination meant permanently locked out of the WASP establishment Jack craved entry to. Before the fortune, before the Brickwork empire, he'd been an Olympic gold medalist in sculling at the 1920 Antwerp Games. But before that triumph came a humiliation he carried like a scar for the rest of his life. England's Henley Royal Regatta rejected his entry, a slight widely attributed to his working-class background. That rejection calcified into a philosophy. Jack Kelly became a man who measured love in trophies and withheld approval the way a banker withholds credit, until the collateral exceeded any reasonable threshold. His son Kell was groomed to avenge the Henley snub and eventually did compete there and win, completing a decades-old revenge circuit. Older daughter Peggy was considered the family beauty. The Kelly household ran on physical prowess, competitive fire, and an emotional economy where affection functioned as a prize to be earned, never freely given. Into this family of broad-shouldered athletes and social climbers, Grace arrived. Thin, quiet, asthmatic, theatrical, and utterly unlike the rest of them. Robert Lacey's biography, Grace, describes her as the fragile girl from Philadelphia who worshipped her all-powerful father. That single phrase contains the entire emotional engine of everything that followed. Grace was the unfavored child. She retreated into performance and make-believe while her siblings conquered the physical world Jack valued. Her younger sister Lizanne fit the family mold more comfortably than Grace ever did. When Grace announced she was leaving for New York to study at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the family treated it like a phase, something to be tolerated, not celebrated. Acting registered in Jack Kelly's scoring system somewhere between hobby and embarrassment. He dealt in brick and mortar and muscle. His daughter wanted to stand in front of cameras and pretend to be other people. She became extraordinary at it. Grace landed roles, graduated from modeling to movie star. Alfred Hitchcock cast her 3 times, in Dial M for Murder, then Rear Window, then To Catch a Thief. What audiences felt instinctively was this. She projected a surface of cool patrician composure that masked something volatile underneath. That tension between what she showed the world and what she actually felt made her magnetic on screen. It also described her entire relationship with her father. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress for The Country Girl in 1954. By multiple biographical accounts, Jack Kelly's reaction was the worst kind of response a parent can deliver. Not anger, not dismissal, but muted acknowledgement. Something that communicated, without needing to be spelled out, "This is fine, but it's not what I would have chosen for you." An Oscar, the single highest honor her profession could bestow, and it barely registered on her father's scale. The man had won an Olympic gold medal. He understood achievement on a physical, tangible plane, something you could hold in your hands, something that proved your body had outperformed every other body in the world. A statuette handed out by Hollywood people in tuxedos existed in a different category for Jack Kelly, one he never fully respected. People who've studied Grace Kelly's life for years keep arriving at the same word for him: unpleasable. One adjective that does more explanatory work than any biography chapter because it captures a specific cruelty. A father who never moves the finish line closer, only further away. Lacey's biography documents how the father placed great value on ending the relationship between his daughter and various suitors he deemed unworthy, revealing a man who controlled Grace's romantic life as an extension of his authority over every other dimension of her existence. A theory surfaces again and again among those who know her story deeply. Grace married a prince to impress and appease her father. If true, it reframes the entire fairy tale as a daughter's final, most desperate bid for a love she could never secure through talent alone. Was she still trying to earn his approval? The evidence says yes. Always yes. Within a year of that underwhelming Oscar reception, Grace met a man whose title offered something no acting award could, the kind of social elevation that even Jack Kelly couldn't dismiss. The Principality of Monaco in the mid-1950s was a 0.78 square mile Mediterranean microstate surviving on gambling revenue from the Casino de Monte Carlo and the strategic goodwill of France, which could have absorbed it at any moment. Prince Rainier III had inherited this fragile arrangement when he succeeded his grandfather Louis II in 1949, and by the time he started looking for a wife, the situation had become genuinely precarious. France had ended a crucial tax treaty that had previously shielded Monaco's finances, creating a fiscal crisis that threatened the Principality's sovereignty. Worse, the real economic power in Monaco didn't belong to the prince at all. After World War II, Aristotle Onassis had quietly accumulated control over more than half of Monaco's wealth: the casino, the hotels, the entire tourist infrastructure, all funneled through the Société Monégasque de Banque et de Métaux Précieux. Rainier was sovereign in name. Onassis operated as sovereign in practice. Rainier held the title, Onassis held the checkbook. Rainier needed to diversify Monaco's international profile, attract tourism that wasn't dependent on Onassis's casino operation, and assert his independence. A glamorous American wife could accomplish all of those objectives simultaneously. International media attention, tourist revenue driven by celebrity rather than gambling, legitimacy on the world stage. Father Tucker, a Catholic priest serving as intermediary, helped arrange the introduction between Rainier and Grace at the Cannes Film Festival in May 1955. Tucker was careful to deflect rumors about the prince's former relationship with French actress Gisèle Pascal, who'd been deemed unsuitable, partly because she was believed to be infertile. The requirements for a bride were explicit, if unstated: produce an heir, attract global media coverage, and, critically, bring money. According to the documentary investigation, the dowry was characterized as a necessary cash infusion designed to help get Monaco back on track to becoming a wealthy nation built on gambling. The payment broke down into two parts: $1 million from the Kelly family fortune, Jack's brick-and-mortar money, and $1 million from Grace's own Hollywood earnings. Jack Kelly initially objected. He reportedly stated, "My daughter doesn't have to pay any man to marry her." That sentence tells you everything about how his mind worked. His objection had nothing to do with protecting Grace from a transactional arrangement. Kelly pride demanded that no one think a Kelly needed to buy what a Kelly should command by presence alone. But Jack Kelly paid. He paid because the math worked spectacularly in his favor. An Irish Catholic bricklayer's granddaughter, becoming Her Serene Highness, was the ultimate answer to every WASP drawing room in Philadelphia that had ever looked past the Kellys, like cashing in a lifetime of social debt in a single transaction. For a man who'd turned a Henley snub into decades of competitive fury, a real princess in the family was the one trophy that couldn't be dismissed by any social register in America. Grace paid, too. Every dollar she'd earned standing in front of Hitchcock's camera, every paycheck from her years at MGM, was folded into the dowry for a man whose principality was being squeezed by France and overshadowed by a Greek shipping magnate. She converted her entire professional identity into a check and handed it to a prince who needed it to keep his country solvent. The courtship was remarkably brief. They met in May 1955. By January 1956, the engagement was announced. Both parties understood the deal's underlying logic. Rainier needed money and fame, Grace needed a title and her father's approval, and prolonged courtship served neither interest. Whether genuine affection existed between them deserves honest acknowledgement. Multiple sources suggest Rainier was attracted to Grace, and she found his old-world courtliness appealing. Affection and transaction can coexist in the same relationship. Two people can love each other and still be engaged in a deal. But love was never the primary engine driving the arrangement. Monaco's empty treasury and a daughter's empty heart were, both desperate to be filled. 30 million people watched the wedding on April 19, 1956. Grace's dress was designed by Helen Rose, MGM's costume designer, who had dressed her in High Society, the studio's wedding gift to their departing star. 25 yards of silk taffeta, 100 yards of silk net, 300 yards of antique Valenciennes lace, 6 weeks to construct. Hollywood didn't just lose an actress that day. MGM literally costumed the ceremony that took her away, blurring the boundary between royal wedding and film production in ways that revealed exactly what this event was. One final production, one last costume for the role of a lifetime. Grace wept during the civil ceremony on April 18th in the throne room of the Palace of Monaco. Biographers have interpreted those tears variously: overwhelming emotion, exhaustion from weeks of relentless media coverage, or something deeper and less comfortable that none of them fully name. The Kelly family descended on the principality with the energy of people inspecting a purchase. Monegasque aristocracy found their brash American confidence grating. Culture clash saturated the entire week. But Jack Kelly was, by all accounts, finally satisfied. His daughter was becoming a real princess. A palace, a throne, a lineage stretching back centuries. Whether he told Grace he was proud of her that day, whether he finally said the words she'd spent her entire life waiting to hear, has never been credibly reported. That silence may be the cruelest detail in the whole story. What followed the wedding was an education in the difference between playing a role and being trapped inside one. Monaco's court was formal, hierarchical, deeply suspicious of outsiders. Grace spoke limited French. She had no real friends in the principality. Palace staff who'd served the Grimaldi family for generations viewed the American newcomer with curiosity and condescension in equal measure. Her daily life became a procession of rigid protocol and ceremonial obligations, receiving foreign dignitaries, attending state functions, performing the public rituals of a princess, while privately adjusting to the reality that she had no independent role, no creative outlet, and no community of her own. She had walked away from a career where she was the most important person on set and entered a world where she was expected to be decorative, dutiful, and quiet. The glamorous life that the world's press projected onto the marriage bore almost no resemblance to the daily reality, which multiple biographers describe as a loneliness so profound it amounted to slow-motion psychological collapse. She'd surrendered her American citizenship as part of the marriage arrangement, a detail that rarely lands with the weight it deserves. Grace didn't just move to a new country. She legally ceased to be American. Her passport, her national identity, her right to return home as a citizen, all gone, folded into the same transaction that took her money and her career. Before her marriage, Grace had well-documented relationships with several of her leading men: Ray Milland, Clark Gable, William Holden, Bing Crosby, several of whom were married at the time. Biographers including Donald Spoto and Robert Lacey confirmed these relationships, which were common enough within the 1950s studio system to be almost structural. What matters here is the pattern: a woman repeatedly drawn to powerful, older men whose approval she sought, mirroring the dynamic with her father with uncomfortable precision. The competitor documentary omitted this entirely, and one viewer called it out explicitly. The facts are documented Hollywood history. Years into the marriage, a lifeline appeared. Alfred Hitchcock, who had directed Grace in 3 of her most celebrated films, offered her the lead in his new film, Marnie. For Grace, the offer must have felt like a reprieve, a chance to reclaim the identity she had surrendered. She wanted to do it, but political tensions between Monaco and France made the optics of the princess returning to a Hollywood soundstage untenable. Monaco's citizens, who had accepted the American actress as their princess partly because she'd given up acting, reacted with hostility to the prospect of her return. The message was unmistakable. The people who had received Grace as a princess wouldn't permit Grace to be an actress again. She withdrew from the project. Tippi Hedren got the role, and with that capitulation, the last door to Grace Kelly's former life closed permanently. She would never act again. She threw herself into the Princess Grace Foundation, the Monaco Ballet, various arts initiatives that reflected her genuine intelligence and cultural values. Real contributions. Meaningful work that left a lasting mark on Monaco's cultural landscape. Choosing motherhood and royal duty over a Hollywood career isn't inherently tragic. Millions of women make that choice freely and find deep fulfillment in it. The tragedy specific to Grace was that her choice was never fully her own. It was shaped by a father's emotional withholding, a husband's contractual expectations, and a principality's political demands. And the life she'd chosen couldn't accommodate even a fragment of the life she left behind. She couldn't act, she couldn't earn her own money, she couldn't go home. Jack Kelly Sr. died on June 20th, 1960, 4 years after the wedding that had been the crowning achievement of his social ambitions. He was 70 years old. For Grace, his death meant the permanent loss of the audience she'd been performing for her entire life. Every decision she'd made, New York, Hollywood, the Oscar, the Crown, had been filtered through one question. That question could now never be answered. She had made the ultimate gesture, paid the ultimate price, and she got exactly 4 years to see if it registered before death took the only critic who mattered. Whatever verdict Jack Kelly reached about his daughter's extraordinary life, he carried it to his grave without delivering it. 22 years remained. 22 years in a role she'd bought, but couldn't return. In a kingdom that needed her face on the postcard more than it needed her happiness. Her pre-marriage earnings had been consumed by the dowry. Her post-marriage income was non-existent because her return to the only profession she'd ever known was blocked. She had no independent financial life. Her wealth had been absorbed into the royal household, month by month, year by year, until there was nothing personal left. The Channel 5 investigation would later trace what remained: $10,000. A woman whose family had written a $2 million check to enter this marriage died with $10,000 to her name. Princess Caroline has acknowledged publicly that she and her brother Albert weren't close to their parents, a statement that quietly demolished the authorized version of the fairy tale family. Reverential documentaries have featured Prince Albert's curated home videos, warm footage bathed in golden light. Caroline's words told a different story entirely. The children of this supposed fairy tale grew up distant from the two people supposedly living it. If Grace's own daughter says the closeness was absent, then the devoted princess mother of Monaco's official mythology was another performance. A woman denied closeness by her own father never fully learned how to offer it. On September 13, 1982, Grace was driving her Rover 3500 on the D37 road above Monaco, a narrow, winding mountain road with hairpin turns and steep drops. Her daughter Stephanie, 17 years old, sat in the passenger seat. The car left the road and went down the mountainside. Grace was 52. 3 theories have persisted about what happened, and honesty demands presenting all of them without choosing one. First, Grace suffered a stroke at the wheel, a medical event, her body failing at the moment control mattered most. Medical evidence supports this possibility. At 52, with the accumulated stress of 26 years inside a role that afforded her almost no personal freedom, a cerebrovascular event was medically plausible. Second, Stephanie may have grabbed the handbrake or otherwise contributed to the loss of control, an allegation fueled partly by Stephanie's near silence about what happened inside that car, and partly by reports, never confirmed, that mother and daughter had been arguing. There is no credible evidence to support this version, but her decades of rare public comment have generated relentless speculation, each year of quiet adding another layer of theory. Third, Grace was driving to escape. Proponents of this reading see the crash as the final physical expression of something she'd been attempting emotionally for years. A woman who had been trying to leave in one form or another since the day the Marnie offer was taken from her. Each theory has believers. None has been definitively confirmed. The ambiguity itself carries weight. A woman who spent her entire life being watched. By her father, by Hollywood cameras, by 30 million wedding viewers, by Monaco's citizens and courtiers, died in a moment nobody witnessed clearly enough to explain. Grace died the following day, September 14, 1982. She spent 52 years performing, first for a father who wouldn't applaud, then for cameras that adored her, then for a principality that demanded her image on every postcard and tourism brochure, while denying her permission to do the one thing she was born to do. She purchased the most expensive role ever sold, and the one audience member she'd been performing for died in 1960, 4 years into the run, before she could ever tell her whether it had worked. The remaining 22 years played out inside a part she'd bought but couldn't return. She died on a mountain road above Monaco, in a car going somewhere we'll never know for certain, possibly betrayed by her own body, possibly caught in a struggle, possibly just driving. $2 million to enter, $10,000 when she left. The math of that fairy tale belongs to a woman who deserved far better than the beautiful lie the world keeps telling about her. Subscribe for more stories like this.